In Israel, memorial events have been taking place to mark 2 years since Hamas launched its attacks on the 7th of October. Around 1,200 people were killed by Hamas that day, and 251 others were taken hostage. 48 of those are still in Gaza, though more than half of them are feared dead. In response, Israel's military launched a campaign in Gaza. More than 67,000 people have been killed there, according to the Hamas-run health ministry. But could we be on the brink of an end to the conflict? Today in Egypt, indirect talks between Israel and the Palestinians have been taking place to try to agree President Trump's plan to end the war. We'll have more from Jeremy Bowen on the plan and the situation in Gaza in a moment. But first, our Middle East correspondent Lucy Williamson reports from Jerusalem.
At the Nova Festival site today, they tried to ignore the sounds of war across the border. Tens of thousands of Gazan dead haven't repaired the wounds of survivors here. Rami came here on the 7th of October to rescue people. Posing as an attacker, he saved one young woman from her Hamas captors. But there are ghosts here of those he couldn't save.
I feel a lot of pain because I saw what happened here. The ground we are standing on held bodies and bodies parts. For me, every tree has a meaning. I know what happened to these trees. I know who was tied to these trees.
Hundreds of festival goers were hunted down by Hamas gunmen as the sun rose that day. Dozens more were taken hostage. 22-year-old Libby rang her mother to say she'd been shot in the stomach and that her friend and everyone around her was dead.
And then she said, "Mommy, they're coming to shoot me again." The terrorists, they saw that she's alive, they saw that she's speaking on the phone, and they come for less than 1 meter, and we heard the shots that killed her again.
2 years on, she says she doesn't feel safer here. I ask her what would help.
I think that all the leaders should go. It's like in the computer that you're doing Control-Alt-Delete and you're doing end task. We should end it. This task should be ended.
It's been 2 years since Benjamin Netanyahu vowed to restore Israel's security, but the sounds of the war in Gaza are still echoing around this site. And Benjamin Netanyahu, once known as Mr. Security, is facing the question of whether that war can ever repair the mistakes that led to this. Mr. Netanyahu has faced growing pressure to end the war and bring the hostages home. But with elections due next year, he knows that few at these protests would ever vote for him. His own voters' views on the war are mixed. In this Netanyahu stronghold in Jerusalem, people were preparing for the Jewish holiday of Sukkot. If Benjamin Netanyahu goes along with Trump's plan, what would you say to him?
That is crazy. It's crazy.
He'd lose your support.
He lose everything. But I don't think it's what he's going to do. Maybe it's what he's tell, but it's not what he's going to do.
Tonight in Tel Aviv, a minute's silence for the victims of the attacks. But this is a divided country, led by a man who promised security. How much war will it take to persuade Israelis he didn't fail them back then? Lucy Williamson, BBC News, Jerusalem.
As talks to end the war continue in Egypt, a US team is on its way to the negotiations. Today, President Trump says there is a really good chance a deal can be agreed. His peace plan, presented together with Israel's Prime Minister Netanyahu and agreed in part by Hamas, leaves major sticking points for both sides to resolve. But it does specify that if a ceasefire is agreed, Israel will stop all military operations, Hamas will release all living and dead hostages within 72 hours of the ceasefire, then aid would be able to move freely into Gaza and eventually redevelopment would begin. After 2 years of war in Gaza, the UN estimates more than 90% of homes are thought to have been damaged or destroyed, with hundreds of thousands of people displaced. Hamas have been significantly reduced as a fighting force, but not eliminated. Israel doesn't allow international journalists, including the BBC, into Gaza. Our international editor, Jeremy Bowen, sent this report from Jerusalem.
To mark the anniversary, Hamas released an AI animation celebrating the attacks on Israel 2 years ago. The commentary calls on God to humiliate Israel. It claims Hamas shattered the myth of Israeli invincibility. The video reincarnates leaders Israel has killed. This is Yahya Sinwar, chief architect of the 7th of October, who tried to down an Israeli drone with a stick in his last moments. The video says Palestinians cannot surrender. In Gaza, which Israel does not let us enter to report freely, reality is a long way from AI. 2 years of war and more than 67,000, mostly civilians, killed by Israel, according to the Hamas-run health ministry, means 2 million Gazans are following the talks in Egypt, hoping desperately for a ceasefire. This is Suhaib, filmed by a freelance team working for the BBC, displaced from his home like most Gazans. He says, we've been under this brutal occupation for nearly 2 years. We're praying for a ceasefire and for success in the negotiations. People are fed up with this. They are tired of war. This is Najud, also displaced. She says, I follow the news closely. I tell myself there's progress, be optimistic. Then when night comes, we have nothing more than increased shelling on the tents of displaced people in the areas they claim are safe. On the streets, Hamas is trying to show it's still in charge. A fortnight ago, it carried out a public execution of men it said had collaborated with Israel. They were kicked over and moments later shot dead. Hamas wants to keep some weapons, fearing revenge attacks. A few days ago, this Hamas squad was in a gun battle with a clan it saw as a threat. Israel intervened, killing the Hamas men with a drone. From Jerusalem, I reached a human rights activist in Gaza, Khalil Abu Shamala. He accepts Hamas still has a significant following, but he's had enough. So tell me, do you think Hamas is finished?
I think that it is too late. This is my point of view. It is too late for Hamas to renew or to call people or to ask people to accept them again.
But what about the West Bank, where Jewish settlers attack Palestinians almost every day? This was near Nablus. The West Bank, the biggest part of the land the UK and others recognize as Palestine, is not mentioned in the Trump peace plan, raising Palestinian suspicions.
So the first risk is the possibility that Netanyahu could undermine the talks again. The second thing that worries all of us and all Palestinians, as a matter of fact, is that everybody is worried that if Netanyahu, or once Netanyahu gets his captives, he will reactivate the war. The third big problem is the issue of withdrawal from Gaza. It's not clear if they're really planning to withdraw, and from where are they going to withdraw.
Just outside Jerusalem, Israel has authorized a major expansion of Jewish settlements illegal under international law. Its prime minister says this land is ours. The Israeli government is very open about why it wants to build on these hills, to stop the creation of a viable and independent Palestine. Donald Trump says that he can bring peace to the entire Middle East. The talks in Egypt are not going to do that. They can potentially, if they overcome a lot of obstacles, be an end game for the war in Gaza. But the overall conflict will continue. With Gaza in ruins, Israel wants to declare victory after the talks in Egypt. Hamas wants to survive somehow and rebuild itself. That sounds like an impossible circle to square. Jeremy Bowen, BBC News, Jerusalem.
So, Jeremy, we can talk to Jeremy in Jerusalem now. So, talks are taking place in Egypt now. What chances this time of getting a peace deal?
Well, the general opinion is that this is actually a good chance. And what makes it different is that President Donald Trump is putting pressure not just on Hamas, and there is no political penalty for American presidents to put pressure on Hamas or the Palestinians. But he's also putting pressure on Benjamin Netanyahu, Israel's prime minister, and that is a new thing. It's not something that Joe Biden would have done, and that's probably got them now to the negotiating table. But they're talking about Trump's 20-point plan. Now, to be honest, it's pretty vague in a lot of places. There's precious little detail. It's more like a framework. So what they're trying to do is fill in the gaps with precision, with language, with maps, with timetables, things like that exchange of hostages for Palestinian prisoners, things like whether or not Hamas will be allowed to keep any kinds of weapons, a really difficult agenda. And trying to get into the detail means that's when the obstacles will emerge. And how do they get over that? The crucial thing, I think, is continued American pressure on both sides, because between the Israelis and Hamas, there is, as you'd expect, zero trust or goodwill.